part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Dennis Manoloff Show. I'm across the computer screen from producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell. We come to you on Monday, March 7th of 2022. And I want to say first and foremost that I'm all about perspective. And, you know, what I'm about to talk about is primarily the toy department of sports. And I fully recognize that sports is meaningless in the grand scheme when it comes to what's happening in this world. Most notably, of course, the Russian ongoing invasion of Ukraine and the human rights atrocities that are being administered under the leadership of Russian President Vladimir Putin. I pray every day for a peaceful outcome. I just don't know what that outcome is going to be, when it's going to be. And certainly the world is in turmoil. The world's on edge. But to me, the prayers begin with the Ukrainian people. And I just can't even imagine going through that. And here we are in the United States, and we're extraordinarily grateful for the many blessings that we have and the freedoms that we have. And we can't take for granted the fact that we are able to wake up and not have to worry about bombs near us or a fight breaking out anywhere. So, you know, I just don't know what to pray anymore other than peace and everything else. But it's a scary situation to say the least, and it certainly does. If you don't have perspective by now, then God help you, okay? And I recognize talking about sports, what does it really mean? But we do it though because life goes on, and you have to try to do what you can. So anyway, that's my opening thought there, and cannot begin to describe how sad I am for how sad I feel for the Ukrainian people. All right, we move to first the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavaliers, a gut check victory last night, a game they absolutely needed. 104-96 over the Toronto Raptors at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. The Cavs improved to 37-27. They are number 6 in the East as at the dawn of Monday, the 7th of March. And it really behooved the Cavs to beat the Raptors because the Raptors are the 7th seed in the East. They dropped to 34-30, so the Cavaliers are 3 clear of the Raptors. And, you know, I like their chances to finish at least 6th, which would keep them out of the play-in tournament, which is 7 through 10 in each conference. So excellent job by the Cavaliers to win. I know the Raptors were without Freddie VanVleet and Oganobi, but doesn't matter. You play whoever's available at that particular time, and you don't look back. You don't question any victories nowadays, especially when you're, as the Cavs are, 64 games in. Unfortunately, the Cavaliers just can't seem to enjoy good things. Jared Allen left with a quad injury, and then Shams Charania, the fantastic writer covering the NBA for The Athletic, he said that his sources were telling him Jared Allen fractured a finger. If that's the case, then that's a huge blow, obviously, to the Cleveland Cavaliers, Allen being one of the key pieces. And it's just, it would be a shame. Now, the reason I say if, and I'm not trying to doubt Shams Charania, but as I checked Twitter before we came onto this podcast, Cavaliers were still talking about, Cavaliers were talking to beat reporters and saying if Allen is out, if he injured the finger. So can't guarantee that the finger is injured at this point. But given that it's the Cavaliers and given how many times Cavaliers players have been injured and ill this year, it probably is, which is a daggone shame. But this is a resilient bunch. They've proven it all year. And they're just going to have to, you know, reach into that reservoir again and try to figure out ways to cobble together the remainder of the season, 18 games. And, but I hope that the Jared Allen situation isn't what Shams thinks it is and what I think it is. But you know what? You can't count the Cavaliers out under JB Bicker's staff. And I know they haven't been playing well lately. I mean, the victory last night snapped a 3-game slide. They had lost 6 of 7 entering the game. And as we said, they played a semi-watered down Raptors team. So it's not like the Cavaliers have been clicking. But at least Darius Garland is back from his back issues. And Evan Mobley played really well last night. I thought Mobley had been leaking some oil. I thought he might have been still trying to plow through the rookie wall. But he was really good last night, and that's a huge sign for Cleveland. So the Cavaliers continue, and they try to overcome these injuries. But, it's just a shame that they keep having to deal with either injuries or illness. All right, when we return on the other side of the break, the sorry state of Major League Baseball.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of The Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dennis Manoloff. Across the screen from me on the computer is producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell. We're talking MLB, the sad state of affairs that is Major League Baseball. And a tweet from this morning, again, we're taping on Monday, March 7th. Bob Nightingale covers the MLB, one of the more notable MLB beat writers. Lockout day number 96, no negotiation scheduled as of this morning after MLB declared a deadlock following Sunday's talks. I mean, you know what? By the way, Bob Nightingale, lockout day 96. Who's counting? Well, obviously, Nightingale is. And he does a terrific job. But this is just absurd. The owners and players bickering over a CBA. And I'm not saying it's absurd just because there's, a deadly, bloody humanitarian crisis, conflict, awful situation going on in Ukraine administered by Vladimir Putin's Russia. I'm not saying, how dare they bicker over a CBA because of that. But, it's part of the tone deafness, though. The fact that these two entities, the owners and the players in Major League Baseball, can't seem to read the room ever. Certainly not within the last few years. Because you think about 2020 when there was a pandemic raging, first year of the pandemic, and, baseball spring training was cut short, and then there was question about whether play was even going to resume. I mean, whether the spring training was going to resume, and then, of course, the regular season. Well, it turned out that they had an opportunity to play, but owners and players couldn't come to an agreement, so the commissioner had to step in with a 60-game season that he imposed. And so there was tone deafness that year, and now 2 years later, it's the same kind of deal. People have no patience for this. They don't want to hear that the players are being, grieved, or that the owners are being jacked up. Nobody wants to hear the excuses, the whining. But don't you see, Dennis, from the players' perspective, what the owners are trying to do? Or, Dennis, don't you see what the, owners, or what the players are trying to do to the owners? I don't care. And most people I know don't care. Figure it out. There's no excuse for these delays and these postponements of negotiating sessions. It's absolutely absurd. The CBA expired. The most recent CBA expired the night of December 1st, 2021. I was on the air the night it expired. I was on the air for that final hour of December 1st and the first hour of December 2nd. So we quote unquote celebrated, and I say that facetiously, of course, the end of the CBA and the beginning of the lockout. And I said that December and January were going to fly by, and we're going to look up in February and go, why in the heck hasn't a deal been done? I knew this was going to happen. Well, guess what? December and January flew by, and then February pretty much flew by. And now the owners and players have backed themselves into a corner, so much so that they've already lost regular season games. Guaranteed, regular season will not be 162 games. If MLB and the players, the owners and players are lucky, it'll be, I don't know, in the 140s. But even that's questionable. The way, you're figuring out what's happening here, and based on what Bob Nightingale tweeted. Both sides are dug in. And, I was reading stuff about the players. Well, we're doing this for the future generation. Really? You sure about that? Because I think you're ruining it for the future generation. We got to get this deal right. Well, you know what? Yeah, you do. But at what expense? At what cost? I think you're doing irreparable harm to the game right now. Even though you're going to claim as players, oh, we're doing this for future generations of players. Meanwhile, on the owner's side, the owners continue to fail to realize that they are not the show, okay? They're not the show. They're not the ones who go out there and throw 100-mile-an-hour pitches. They're not the ones who go out there and hit bombs. They don't play. The players are the thing, okay? You take care of the players. So as I read the room, the players don't have enough common sense here, and neither do the owners. That's why I don't care anymore about the blame game. Typically, I'm a player's advocate because I'll side with the millionaire owner over the billionaire player. The millionaire player over the billionaire owner. But now I'm past that point of even caring about which side, is most correct or less put upon. Figure the daggone thing out. Whatever happened to 24-hour negotiating sessions? You blew December and January and February when you could have been hashing all this out. No excuses. Thanks for nothing. Yes, I'm going to like baseball when it comes back. And yes, I would prefer a lockout now to a 1994 end of the season in August and no postseason. Sure. But that doesn't mean I'm anywhere close to being okay with what's happening now. Figure this out and immediately start to repair the damage that you've done, if you can repair it, MLB. All right, when we return on the other side of the break, talk about the conclusion of the NFL Combine and two of the stars that showed up and showed out in Indianapolis.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading,
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. The producer for this episode and many episodes is the great Jordan Powell. Talk about the NFL Combine, which wraps officially today, Monday, March 7th, from Indianapolis, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indy. And I enjoy watching as much as I can of the quote-unquote underwear Olympics, where these prospects are on display. Was it 300 prospects show off their skills, and, you know, they run and they jump and they do all kinds of things and drills. And while I don't believe that the combine is the be all end all, and neither do the NFL teams, by the way, it's certainly a piece of the puzzle. It wouldn't be held. The NFL wouldn't have the combine, wouldn't care about the combine if it wasn't important to some degree. So it's part of the mosaic. And there are guys who absolutely can help themselves in the underwear Olympics. And one of those is a guy I love, Chris Olave of Ohio State, wide receiver for the Buckeyes, and now an NFL prospect, a draftee in April. Chris Olave was sensational, and he ran a great 40, in addition to other things. And Olave, to me, moved up the board. And I know there are some questions about him against press coverage, but Chris Olave is a winner. He makes plays. He's sneaky good, I think. Somehow he's under the radar in certain situations. But this is a guy who I believe climbed into, at the very least, the teens in the first round. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. But Chris Olave did nothing but help himself at the combine. His teammate at Ohio State and his teammate in the wide receiver room, Garrett Wilson, solidified what many of us already knew about Garrett Wilson, that he is supremely talented, and he's going to make one whale of an NFL receiver. He's a legit number one. He ran right with Olave. He and Olave were, I think, 1/100th apart officially on the gun. Sub 4.4, I believe it was 4.31 or 4.32 officially, something in there. But, or maybe 4.36, 4.37, but they were in the 4.3s. And that's fantastic. I mean, research has been done on these NFL prospects, and it's shown that if you're sitting anywhere between 4.4 and 4.5, you're good to go as an NFL receiver. And both Wilson and Olave went under the 4.4. So they got plenty of speed. They got speed to burn. And Wilson in the drills were just awesome again, as we expected him to be. And I have a little bit of sadness, though, when I talk about how great Garrett Wilson was. Sadness from the Browns fans' perspective, because sitting at 13 overall in the first round, Cleveland Browns, they ain't getting Garrett Wilson. Sorry, sorry, it's just not happening. Garrett Wilson, if he wasn't already going to go before 13, he is now. And you'd have to trade up to get him, and I don't even know if that would be possible if you're Cleveland. 13 is going to seem like a long way away when you talk about Garrett Wilson and maybe, Drake London and perhaps Burks, and, with Olave creeping into the middle. I would think Olave would be available at 13, but not much later than that. But Wilson's gone by 10, I think. And so that was the unfortunate part I felt going into the combine was that the receivers were going to show how good they are as a group. And that's exactly what they did. They had speed to burn. Their skills were tremendous. They tested great, in a lot of those drills. And so now I think teams are going to be hungry for this wide receiver class. And that's bad news for Cleveland because Cleveland desperately needs a WR1 and, for that matter, a WR2 because I don't think they're bringing Jarvis Landry back. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of bittersweet. It's good for the receivers, good for the Buckeye receivers, Wilson and Olave, but bad for the Browns because I'm thinking 2 or 3 of the stud receivers are going to be gone by the time the Buckeyes pick at 13 overall. All right, when we return on the other side of the upcoming break, we'll talk a little bit about a soccer situation that I was involved in on Saturday watching my daughter play.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Across the computer screen from me is Jordan Powell, producing and directing. I'm always appreciative of Jordan's skills. This segment I wanted to devote to a segment that kind of blew up on my radio show on News Radio WTM 1100, 106.9 FM out of Northeast Ohio. When I was on Sunday afternoon, I relayed a situation that occurred on Saturday when I was watching my daughter play soccer. And basically it was this. My daughter's team was getting beat late in the second half by a really quality team, I believe, from Cincinnati. And, that team was highly skilled, went about their business in a professional manner, well coached. You tip the imaginary hat to them. They wound up beating my daughter's team 2-0. And my daughter's team's pretty good too. So credit that team that they played for a job well done. But late in the second half, my daughter had a corner kick pretty much very close to me. And me and my wife, Denise, we were sitting there and we were down near where she was hitting the corner kick. And the only people between us and my daughter were a man and presumably his son. But I hadn't really taken notice of him other than in peripheral vision. Well, my daughter made a kick from the corner and it was caught by the goalie. It wasn't a good enough kick and she didn't get enough elevation on it. She's done a lot of corner kicks in her life and she recognizes, of course, that you need to elevate the ball and, try to create plays in the box. And she's done that many times, but in this case, just mishit it a little bit. The goalie made the grab and okay, unfortunate. Well, all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I hear this guy yell at my daughter, "Hey, you got to get that kick higher." And I was startled and I turned, and as my daughter was running away to chase the play down in the other end, he yelled, "You got to kick that ball over the goalie. You got to get it higher than that," in a real kind of, sharp tone. And so my parental instincts kicked in and I said, what would you want her to do? And I asked her asked him rhetorically, what did you want her to do? Like, I wanted to see if I could force an answer out of him or see if he would actually answer. And he did. He said, well, she's got to kick it higher. She got to create a play for her teammates. And I was like, well, I'll tell you what, because now I was really fried because he actually answered my rhetorical question. And I said, all right, I'll tell you what. I said, you wanted to yell at her right now. How about you wait till after the game and you go up to her and you tell her to her face what you just said while she was running away from you. And you know what he said? Okay, I will. He said that. Okay, I will. My wife witnessed it. She heard it. I said, all right, I'll hold you to it. Well, after the game, sure enough, he takes the coward's way out, walks around me, doesn't want to get near me. He's eyeballing me. I can tell. I'm staring him down because I'm so angry. Doesn't say anything. My wife, Denise, she said, hey, you got to calm down. Don't start anything. Don't embarrass your daughter. Don't embarrass Grace. Okay, so I kept my mouth shut, but I was going to hold him to it. Well, he didn't have the guts to approach my daughter, even though he had ample opportunity when my daughter was walking from the field to the car. We were all walking together. He could have come up to her and said anything, but he wouldn't because he was gutless. And I kept my mouth shut, but I stared at him a couple times. He knew what was on. He knew he didn't want to do it. And it turns out, by the way, he was a parent of one of my daughter's teammates. And so, and I didn't really know that. I thought I had recognized him before, but we hadn't conversed. So it just, it bothered me all the more that he was actually a father of a teammate, because I never criticize my daughter's teammates, ever. Never. And I'm always shouting encouragement. And what I've always believed, first, you don't live vicariously through your kids. When they're out on the field or the court or what have you, you let them play. All right. You're not playing, they're playing. And then on top of that, what I've always said is I let the coaches coach, I let the players play. And I encourage the players. But I don't interfere with the coaches. If they want to criticize my daughter, that's fine. That's their job. Criticize, critique. Anything short of verbal abuse and, of course, physical abuse, I'm okay with. All right? No physical abuse, no verbal abuse, but anything else, fine. If you're a coach, that's your job. Teammates, you want to criticize my daughter? Go ahead and do it. Do it, productively. Do it constructively, civilly, but go ahead. In the interest of winning, in the interest of getting better, fine. And Grace is that way too. She's fine with being criticized by her teammates or her coach. But where I draw the line is fans criticizing my daughter, and in the way that guy did. Okay. And I'm going to say something, and that's my thing too. And I brought it up on the radio show. He has every right to say whatever the heck he wants to say. But guess what? I have every right to respond. I don't have to listen to that and just be quiet. I can say, all right, well, you feel so strongly about it. Why don't you tell my daughter after the game? And when he takes me up on that offer, you want to talk about weak to not follow through on it? That's weak. That really is. Because if I were criticizing his daughter and he challenged me and said, hey, you tell my daughter that face to face after the game instead of while she's running away. And I said, yes, I will. Then you better believe I would do it. I'm not going to take the coward's way out like he did. But I threw that out there to my radio audience, and the phone lines were packed. The text box was blowing up. And honestly, there were more people disagreeing with me than I thought, but I still was, 65-35 support. Some people said that I was the problem, not him, and that criticism is part of the game, and that players have to realize that they're going to get criticized. Well, you know what? Yeah, I understand that to a point if we're talking about professionals. I mean, or even college players. But here we are, my daughter's in 9th grade. I'm not saying she can't take it. She's got a strong skin and a strong will. It's not that she hasn't heard criticism before, but that doesn't mean that she can't be startled by a fan from essentially point blank range who happens to be a father of a teammate yelling at her, and the father of the teammate's not her coach. So, and it wasn't like a team criticism either. It's not like this guy yelled, "Hey, everybody's got to pick up your game," or "Everybody, you got to handle the ball better," or "Let's go, you got to hustle more." No, this was a singular focus. He was eyeballing one kid. That kid was my daughter. He criticized her for too low of a corner kick. Well, you think she was trying to do that? You think that's what her objective was, to kick it to the goalie? Of course she was trying to elevate it, but she was unable to do so on that particular occasion. It would be like, my daughter plays basketball. Okay, so I'm sitting near a parent. My daughter shoots a free throw and misses it. "Hey, you got to make that free throw. Come on, you got to make that free throw. You got to be more accurate." You think I'm going to sit there and take that and not defend my daughter? And that was the other thing I was saying to the critics of me on the radio show on Sunday. Imagine in a hypothetical. Of course, hypotheticals are imagined, so it's redundant. But here's a hypothetical. You're sitting next to someone, you're very close to that person. This guy was within 10 yards of my wife and me. All right, so you're sitting relatively close to an adult. Turns out the adult's a father of one of the kids on your team. And let's say that father is criticizing your child 6, 7, 8 times in 15 to 20 minutes instead of just once. You mean to tell me you're going to sit there and listen to that for 20 minutes? Of course you're not. You're going to step in and you're going to say, "Hey, how about you keep my daughter's name out your mouth?" All right. And so my feeling is, if you're going to step in after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 criticisms, why can't you step in after one? And to repeat, I have no problem if the coach of my daughter's team on Saturday yelled across the field, "Hey, you got to kick it higher." You know what? That's his prerogative. He can do that, even though it's obvious that she needed to kick it higher, and she knew she needed to kick it higher. If her teammates said, "Hey, Grace, you got to kick it higher than that," fine. But I'm not going to listen to it from a parent. And here's the other thing. There was nothing constructive about what he said. It's not like he said, "Hey, you need to kick it higher, and in order to do so, you need to turn your foot a little bit, or you need to angle your leg, or sweep it a little more, or bend your knees more." No, it was a patently obvious statement that was made that didn't need to be made. So I felt like I was in the right. I think in retrospect, though, challenging the parent to come up to my daughter afterwards might have been a little over the top, might have been a little hubris. But I still, at the time, felt like it was the right play because I wanted to put him on the spot. I wanted to make him defend what he said. And I still maintain he took the coward's way out by not talking to my daughter after the game. And let it be known, too, no punches were thrown, no confrontation. I didn't get near him. He didn't obviously get near me. I'm not advocating ever for any face-to-face screaming matches with parents. And when I yelled at him initially, I sat where I was. I didn't get up and walk over to him. So anyway, that was an interesting story I thought I could relay. But I love my daughter, Grace, with every fiber of my being, and I will defend her to the ends of the earth. All right, when we return for the final segment, some controversy involving a major shoe and apparel company.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swing and a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. producer extraordinaire, Jeremy Powell. I did it again. Jordan Powell. We'll keep it going, Jordan. Sorry about that. I mix you up with the great Jeremy Powell. Jordan Powell is across the computer screen from me and doing his typically excellent job to get this podcast processed. Final segment. For me, it's controversial. Maybe for others it isn't, but had this come through my Twitter feed, courtesy of Adidas or Adidas. Adidas, I think is how they pronounce it. A commercial that, and I'll just keep calling them Adidas, even though it might not be pronounced that way. I'm going to say Adidas. Impossible? ? No, I'm possible. That's what Adidas has created out of impossible. They've called it I'm possible. And then the commercial went on to show some women who, maybe are unconventional as far as starring in certain roles, and said anything's possible for these women. And I'm all for that, 1,000%. But there was also a part of the commercial that rubbed me the wrong way, and that is they were talking about a trans woman in competition. And they were saluting the opportunity for a trans woman to compete. And as they spoke the words "or compete as a trans woman," they were showing a volleyball player, presumably a trans woman, spiking the ball in a game. And I'm sitting there going, are you sure that you want to celebrate that, Adidas? Because what you're doing is you are propping up a transgender athlete, but you're not propping up that transgender athlete in a vacuum. You're propping up that transgender athlete at the expense of women and girls. Sorry, but that's true, okay? I am the least bigoted person in the world, the least racist person in the world. I have no racist, bigoted, homophobic, xenophobic, LGBTQ-phobic bone in my body. None, zero. You want to do what you want to do, that's fine. Within the law, okay? Within the law, within rules and regulations of a civil society, within social mores, fine. You go ahead and do that. I believe that I answer to God Almighty, so therefore I think that you answer to God Almighty too, and however you feel you need to answer to the Creator, that's your business. I've got no issues with anyone doing whatever they want to do, even though, my religious beliefs teach me to disagree with certain lifestyles. That doesn't mean that I tell anybody how to do anything, and it doesn't mean that I'm reacting angrily or even in any way, shape, or form overtly upset with those people. Anybody else who does something, just because you do something differently than my religious beliefs doesn't mean I'm not going to like you, doesn't mean I'm not going to get along with you, doesn't mean I'm going to begrudge you the opportunity to forge your own path. So to me, with the transgender community, fine. If that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. But there is a but when it comes to transgender and athletics. Because when the woman is going to the biological man is going to identify as a woman and enter the female athletic arena, there are going to be consequences. There just are. I mean, and there are plenty of examples already, but you think about the one who was recently in the news, Leah Thomas of Penn, the swimmer, was a mediocre male swimmer, and then all of a sudden was dominating on the women's side. And there was a story written about how the women on the Penn team, at least anonymously, were saying, we don't like the fact that Leah is in our locker room with the possibility that things can be seen that shouldn't be seen by women, in a locker room, let alone what Leah's doing in the pool. So it's not as simple. It's nowhere near as simple to just say, hey, transgender people, those who identify as different from their biological sex, they have rights too. I believe that. I do believe they have rights. Everybody has rights. But in the athletic realm, if a male is identifying as a female and then steps in, there are going to be questions that have to be answered. And there's going to be controversy. And it's not born of a phobia. It's not born of a bias. It's born of common sense. The biological male, even if the testosterone levels are under the threshold, just the fact that you're a biological male with the muscle structure, the bone density, the muscle, the frame, you're going to have an advantage. And I think that this is only the type of stuff that Adidas just did, and with other things happening, it's only going to get worse, in my opinion, for women and female girl athletes. Imagine this too. I mean, think about this. In high school sports, let's just take basketball as an example. What if you have a 6'2" biological male who identifies as a female by the 9th grade and has athletic skills and knows how to play basketball? And all of a sudden that player is on a girls' team, a girls' high school team. How's that going to go over? And so it's one thing with individual sports, because I think the solution with individual sports is men compete against men and there's men championships. Women compete against women and there's women's championships. And transgender competes against transgender and there's a transgender champion or champions. I mean, champion or however many are in the field. But in team sports, it's different even. I mean, it's more pronounced because you have the potential to really mess things up for girls. So when I am throwing up the yellow flag here, even the red flag, I'm not, in my mind, doing it at the expense of the transgender more than I am in defense of the girls' athletics and trying to protect the integrity of girls' sports. So that's why the Adidas latest commercial rubbed me the wrong way, because I don't know if you really want to go down that road. If you really want transgenders to quote unquote take over women's sports. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. And thanks most of all to Jordan Powell for producing. We'll talk to everybody soon.